So we have added the concrete5 toolbar to the site, and that also means that when we do stuff like this, I can actually change the the title of my site dynamically. So now the title tag is served by concrete5 because I added that header required, and you can see in the tab up here that that it is dynamically changing. And so the next thing that I would do if I were doing this, I would probably start. What would I do? I think I would start to make certain elements of this theme dynamic. And so I'm not going to cut out this content yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, I'm going to take this guy here, and I'm going to take this guy here, and I'm going to make them actually something that you can edit through the CMS. It's very basic stuff. And this is interesting because what you want to, these things, if you look at the if you look at the example here, these are very clearly global to the site. You know, the content in here, in this main content area, and these left and right sidebars in the home page, that stuff is changing. But this nav here and this logo up here, those are global to the front end of your website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some areas in concrete5 that the CMS can use to, I'm going to add some areas that we can edit through the CMS, which actually will be global to the entire site. So looking through my default.php page template, it looks pretty clearly that this div ID equals header is the header across the top of the page. And then there's this div ID logo. So what I'm going to try and do, just off the top of my head, is I'm going to try and add a global area inside this div. So this is some basic concrete5 code. The first line here defines an area in my template, and since it's global area, what that means that this area, whenever someone adds something into it, it will be updates the contents of it. It will be updated anytime the logo is called. So that actually is probably not the best name for this because it needs to be global. So what we're going to call this, we'll call it site logo. That's a good one. And then this takes care of actually displaying the contents of the area and making them display as editable if I am logged in to the site. And I am going to save the HTML here in a second document because we might want to use it. Next, you can see there is an ID called top nav, and there is a unordered list inside here with the nav. And this is really, really fortunate because the concrete5 Auto Nav Block by default uses an unordered list to manage its nav items. So when we swap this out and put in a site global nav up here, we can just add an Auto Nav block and set it to show pages at the top level of my site, and it will work just exactly the same way that this does. So we're going to copy this code here, and we are going to paste it down here. We're going to call this header nav. You need to make sure that you name these areas appropriately. Next, I'm going to refresh this page. You can see the content went away, but if I edit this page, you can see that there are, in fact, some concrete5 editable areas. So if I went in here and I go into HTML, I could copy this HTML back, or I could add an image block. I could do any sort of thing that I wanted to do. I'm going to just add some basic HTML. And I'm going to call it concrete5 training. Actually, I'm going to add it through the content block so that I can actually link concrete5 training to the home page. So since it's expecting an H1 tag at the top, that's what I'll give it. Heading 1, and I will insert link to page. And there's only one, page in my site, so I will click on that one. Don't worry about the fact that this doesn't really look like how it's going to look ultimately. There are a number of things we can do to make the content in the content edit interface look like the actual site that you're working on, and we'll get to that if we have time a little later. Now, that is how this looks. Darkness is all uppercase. There's the small tagline down there. It doesn't really look that great when it spans 2 lines, though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this a little bit. I'm going to just call it concrete5 instead. That looks a little bit better. Now I'm going to add to my site-wide header nav. I'm going to add an Auto Nav Block. And before I do that, I'm going to actually build out some different pages in my site. I'm going to rename this back to home so that it looks nice. Then I'm going to add some pages here. Now, since I only have a page in my site called right sidebar, that's a little weird because in actuality, the only page I've built is more of a full width page type than anything else. So I'm going to go into my page types and I'm going to add full. If I give it the handle of full, it will use a template named full.php in the theme. However, since I don't have that, but my default.php is a full width page type, I should be good to go. And then I'm going to delete my right sidebar page. And I can do that because I haven't used any pages of the type. Well, I thought I hadn't, but I realized now that I need to change the page type on the home page. So I come in back to the sitemap, hit the design option, and change it from right sidebar to full. Now I can go back here to right sidebar, and now let's try and delete it again. That works much better. This still looks exactly the same. And I'll come back into my sitemap and I will make some fake pages. I'll make a page called About. Page called Contact Us. That seems pretty good for this little demo. And now if I come back to this site, edit this page again. If I add an Auto Nav block to my site-wide header nav, I can show off pages dynamically. So the Auto Nav, if you haven't played with it too much, is just a way to dynamically build navigations. The options are a little complicated, so much so that we've actually got a special class for it. But by default, it works pretty much how we want it. You can see through preview, this is the markup that's going to be generated and the pages that will be used. By default, we're showing pages at the top level of the site, and that's exactly what we want here. So if I add this to the site and publish my edits, you can see that these pages are put into my nav. And even more importantly, they dynamically link to the pages that we have created in our site. And if we click through to these pages, the nav and the concrete5 logo over here are all still on these pages. That's because they're global areas. Now, once we get rid of this and actually add page-specific areas, this content will change from page to page, but the nav will always be the same. And you'll notice that it doesn't actually appear that these pages have active states. And I wonder why that is. It's probably because the Auto Nav adds a certain class which the style sheet which the theme does not recognize. So let's take a look at what's going on. The Auto Nav adds a class called nav selected to my list item, and also nav path selected to my list item. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the HTML that is being added here, and we are going to add a class to it. Looks like it has a class called active instead of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for this active class, which I'm going to guess is in navi.css, and we're going to change that to nav path selected. And there you can see that all that stuff is now working. So now I can click around my concrete5 site. The pages that I add dynamically at the top of the site appear in this nav. Super easy. So now that we've got a global area at the top of this page, I am going to remove the content from the middle of the page, which is specific to this theme. So what I really want to do is I want to add the content. I want to add an area here that has content, and I want to remove this breadcrumb, and then I want to make it editable. So I find in my theme this wrapper class, which appears to wrap around this breadcrumb, and then I'm going to delete that because I don't really want the breadcrumb right now. I might want it later. If I refresh, you can see that that's gone now. And then we have wrapper, container, and then it looks like the main content in my full content area. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take all this content and delete it. And then I'm going to add a concrete5 area instead. And typically, when we do this, we add an area called main. Main is kind of the standard concrete5 main content area. It's good to standardize on these things so that when you're switching themes on your site, if the theme you're switching to uses an area that, if it doesn't use the areas that your previous theme used, you'll experience content loss because the areas need to be named the same. So the content will actually still be in the database, but until you change the theme, until you change the area name in the template, it won't know where to put the content, and so it will appear like it's gone. So it's good to standardize on these things, and that is what we're doing here. So we are adding an area called main. And you'll notice that this is a little different syntax-wise than the previous PHP code we added. Instead of global area, this is just area. That means that it is specific to the page that you're viewing. And then you can also see that that's the case with this line. There is still a display function, which you need to call, but you're passing a variable to it instead. And the C there is actually the current page object. So it's already populated automatically by the time you get into a page template, so you don't have to worry about any code here. It's already there. You just need to make sure that you pass it in there. So this snippet of code with whatever area you're adding will become very much second nature to you by the time you're done with concrete5 themes. So if I refresh, you'll see I still have my global area at the top. I have some stuff at the bottom that I haven't done anything with. but I don't have content there because it is now new. And I can add content. If I go to the internets and I get some sample content, I can do that here. I can paste it in. You can see that it all shows up pretty good. And this template actually has fairly low contrast on its text, but it is in fact in there. I can, of course, add in header tags and images, links to pages, and it all will automatically use the styles in my site. So you'll see that this site is set up to make H1s look nice. The links already look like all the other links in the site. It's very, very easy to make your site editable. And if I come to the About page, it has completely different content because the home page is set up differently. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to edit this, copy it, and then delete this block because we want our home page to look a little bit fancier than this. So I'm going to move this content block to the About page, just using the old-fashioned copy-paste method, which the content block supports. And so now if I come back to the home page, it's blank, but About has this content instead. Next, I want to do something with this footer down here. You know, I want to make it so that it is global the same way that the other stuff is global in this demo. So if I come to the home page of my, if I come to the home page of this demo, and I come down, it looks this way. And then I come to the style demo. They all look the same. So this is pretty clearly meant to be a global footer in the same way that the header is meant to be a global header. So we're going to build it like that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just make some areas for all of the different sort of modules I see in this HTML. So I come down to my HTML here. Looks like there is a footer div, and then there's a newsletter here, and then some things we call foot boxes. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy their newsletter text. And I'm going to keep it over here just so that we have access to it later. And I'm going to create a global area down here called newsletter. And you might want to know why I'm doing this. Why wouldn't I just keep the code that's there? You know, if this is going to be specific, if this is going to be specific to newsletter, is there really any value in me making it an editable area in concrete5? Well, I think there is, because what we can do now is we can add some interactivity to our website. I'm going to go grab the HTML actually and add an HTML block just because it's simpler that way. I go back and grab the HTML they had, just H2 and a P tag, so that's pretty basic. And that looks pretty good. And then I can actually add a form block. And our form block has an email address in here. I can add this. Now this isn't going to look perfect because, you know, this doesn't always look exactly, it doesn't always look exactly the way that you want it to without some styling. So what we will do is we will add some special stuff to our site. We'll go into what will we do? We'll go into tables.css, which they provided. It looks like they are adding borders to all tables, and I don't really care for that. So what we're going to do is we'll keep that, but I'm going to add a special rule up here that gets rid of the border when it's inside the newsletter. That's getting closer. Looks like I've got to add it to the TD tag as well. That's getting a lot closer. Now let's figure out why this is looking so big in my view here. That's probably because the table has a width of 100%, which divs don't always like. So what we're going to do here, we're going to just hard code this for the sake of this demo. We'll make it a little bit smaller. Do I have to really make it smaller than that? That's interesting. You're going to find yourself doing stuff like this a lot in concrete5 just during the building process, just simply because sometimes it takes this amount of effort. I think that is actually working this way because in their demo they put the email up here, whereas we put it on the side. So what we're going to do is we are going to look for footer in our forms.css. We're going to try and shrink it down just a little bit. That looks pretty good. And so now, if I have an email address and I submit it, it's automatically into my concrete5 site. And in my form results, I automatically have a very helpful email news tracker. So that is kind of why you might want to make this an interactive editable area. And of course, since it's global, it's found on every page of the site. And then we can do similar stuff for the rest of this footer. We have these things called foot boxes. Let's make editable areas for all of them. Foot box 1. Foot box 2. Foot box 3. And now, of course, when I add content to my site, I can edit content. I can do all sorts of different stuff. And you can see that I have some content in my footer now. And of course, it is all the same all throughout my site. Now again, this doesn't look perfect. You'd probably want to make content that was more in line with how tall your actual this actual portion of your site was. But, you know, for the purposes of this demo, it's pretty cool.